Back on the video record, time is 3:24 p.m.
In 2012, did Jennifer Hasselberger urge you to come down to the file storage, wherever they were, and look at those Shelley files to demonstrate to you that this was illegal child pornography?
Well, the way you framed your question, I'd have to answer no. She
Well,
did ask me to look at some of the images that were on something. I don't know what they were on.
And she was concerned that they were illegal images, child pornography, correct?
Yes.
And what was your response to her?
I told her I was not going to look at those images.
What did you tell her to do?
I told her if she thought they were illegal, she should report it to the police.
And was there any discussion with anybody else about her exhortation to you and your response?
I reported it to Father Laird, and as far as I know, he had the same response for her when she reported it to him.
Did you report it to Laird immediately?
Well, I don't know what you mean by immediately, but it would have been within a day or two of her and it was more than one occasion that she said to me that she thought this stuff was illegal.
How many times did she tell you that she thought it was illegal?
Well, at least twice. I don't know if it was more than twice.
And she based it on her viewing of the images, correct?
Correct. As far as I know, I didn't know that she did anything else. She hadn't consulted with anyone else.
Did she tell you that she had presented it to the Archbishop or intended to?
No, I never learned that till much later.
Okay. How did you learn that she had?
I think in the news reports, as far as I know. I don't remember that I heard about it before the news reports.
Her attention was drawn to this because they were looking at Shelley for a new assignment.
Correct.
Even after she had urged you to look at this and express these concerns, are you aware that Shelley was allowed to continue in ministry and then report to the parish that he was going on to sabbatical?
Well, I know that Father Shelley remained in St. Hugo until the merger of St. Hugo with St. Genevieve. I'm not certain I know when that was, and especially not certain when that was in relation to whenever Jennifer was raising these issues about this material.
Well, he reported to the parish that he had requested a sabbatical and it had been granted by the Archbishop. Do you
I know
dispute
nothing.
that?
I don't know anything about that.
If that was the case, that would be kind of a... Do you think that was a misrepresentation to the parishioners about his reason for his departure?
Well, I think they were putting him on a sabbatical until they decided what assignment they were going to give him, if they were going to give him an assignment.
Don't you think that the parishioners were entitled to know that Shelley had a history that went back to 2004 that could pose a risk of harm or danger to the youth?
I think you're mistaken there. The conclusion that was drawn from the review of that material was that it was not child pornography, it was not illegal. So your question presumes that he had engaged in some kind of illegal conduct, and he hadn't, apparently, according to the investigation that was done at that time, which has since been confirmed by police and prosecution authorities.
That was an internal investigation done by the Archdiocese investigators, correct? And the Archdiocese officials that made that determination. Well, not external or law enforcement in 2004, correct?
Well, to the best of my knowledge, from what I learned, largely from Jennifer Hasselberger, what had been done was Richard Setter and this Johnson guy, and Johnson was apparently an expert in the area.
And they're the ones that found it to have been borderline.
Correct, which means it's not illegal.
No, it means it's reportable.
Well, I think it's argumentative, counsel. It was considered borderline. It's not reportable for a variety of reasons if you'd bother to do the legal research.
I have, and the statute says suspicions or reason to believe. And if
I think
it's
you better read the
borderline, it's
statute.
suspicion or
Would you
reason
like to take a
believe.
break and read the statute and go see if it has the word suspicions in it?
Well,
it says no or has reason to believe.
It's been interpreted to mean suspicions. And the statute says
again, I'm not going to argue with you about it. I wasn't there in 2004,
well,
so I wasn't involved in the decision to report it. All I know is that when I learned about it in about 2012, the matter was obviously 8 years later.
In any case, are you aware that the parishioners threw him a big party?
I'm not aware of that. Well, I shouldn't say that. I've since read you or somebody characterizing that in the media, but that's the only source of that information.
Doesn't this thing alarm you, this Shelley thing?
No.
Were you aware that a letter was drafted to the CDF to Cardinal, then Prefect Leveda, concerning the Archbishop's concerns that his advisors are telling him that he may be in violation of law by reason of possession of child pornography?
Again, counsel, you're mischaracterizing the letter. The letter was drafted by Jennifer Hasselberger, expressing what she perceived to be her view of the matter. It was not reflective of the Archbishop's view, which was just the opposite of that.
There are notations. It's on the Archbishop's signature, isn't it?
I don't think he ever signed the letter.
I know,
Never got
but it was
sent.
prepared for the Archbishop.
Well, sure, that was a common practice that Jennifer would be the one that would prepare a letter if it went to Cardinal Leveda.
And there's handwritten notes on it by the Archbishop, aren't there?
I don't know. I've never seen the handwritten notes by the
Well, then
Archbishop.
why are you telling me what that letter's about when you say you haven't seen it?
Because I've heard him comment about it.
So you're making your assertions under oath about what the Archbishop's letter said without having read it. Is that what you're saying?
Right, because he's saying that
Okay,
he didn't
we
send it
got
because
it.
it mischaracterized his view.
We got it.
Okay.
You haven't read the letter, right?
No, I have read the letter, but I didn't read his handwritten notations.
Okay. So you don't know what he wrote on it?
I don't.
Okay.
And I'll be happy to review those if you want to share it with me.
Those notes speak for themselves.
Okay.
I don't need you to speak for him on that. He's already
And to
spoken.
use Mr. Finnegan's words, I don't necessarily want to be contentious, but I think it's important that we get to the truth about the question.
Well, I think it's also important that you talk about what you know about it. And if you don't know about it, the notes on the letter, don't tell me what they say.
I didn't.
Don't say.
I didn't say.
Counsel, you've been arguing with the witness the entire day and testifying yourself, which is not necessarily truth, it's what you say exists. So let's just get to questioning the witness. And
Were you
arguing.
involved in the reporting or the consideration of reporting to the CDF,
No.
the Shelley matter?
The only thing I know is that Jennifer had prepared that letter. She wanted the Archbishop to sign it and hand deliver it to Cardinal Leveda because he was going to Rome, and the Archbishop refused to do that. I know that. And I only know that because Jennifer told me that.
Okay. Did the Archbishop say anything to you about that?
No.
And what did Jennifer say to you about what the Archbishop said to her?
Just that she was mad that he refused to hand carry the letter to Rome. And in fact, Jennifer led me to believe that the letter had been signed and mailed to Rome, and apparently that's incorrect. It was never signed and mailed to Rome.
He actually went to Rome shortly after the preparation of that for the, is it the quinquennial visit? Ad limina visit.
Right.
Yeah. And do you know anything about what was discussed at the ad limina visit?
I do not.
I may have asked you this, but at any time did you review any of the images pertaining to Shelley?
No. And you did ask me that before.
And is that the one where Jennifer asked you to, and you said no? If you think they are, report it.
Correct.
Okay. There was, in the records that we've reviewed, it appears in 2013, some contention and disagreement about whether or not Shelley, maybe in 2012 too, should be allowed in ministry. and Hesselberger arguing against that. Are you aware of that?
Yes, eventually she was against Shelley remaining in ministry.
Did you take a position?
No. And it was an odd sequence of events, which I can describe, but I didn't take a position. I actually became very confused about what Ms. Hasselberger was doing relative to John Shelley.
Who advocated for his continuation in ministry to the Archbishop?
Well, actually, Jennifer was part of the advocacy, if you want to use that word. I think that's a poor word. Sometime in early 2012, Jennifer actually drafted a memorandum setting forth what I would describe perhaps as an outline of an action plan that would allow Father Shelley to return to ministry, and she had a number of elements in that plan that would allow that if certain things happened.
Did Kevin McDonough share with you his analysis that and belief that a large percentage of those viewing pornographic images on the internet are created and are monitored by law enforcement, and if he's not caught having done it, he's not guilty of it, and thus should be continued in ministry? Did you ever hear that position stated or made by him?
Not by him or anybody.
I paraphrased it, but took it from the documents.
Yeah, I've never heard it from that. I've never heard a statement like that from anyone.
There's some discussion and dispute about whether there was child porn on the pornography, and Kevin McDonough's assertion, according to the documents, were, well, they're pop-up ads. And Jennifer Hasselberger took a different view, stating that these are not pop-up ads, and that's not a feasible position. Do you have any knowledge of that?
No,
This states the testimony and the evidence.
Yeah, there was never a discussion about pop-up ads that I was aware of.
Did you ever have discussions with Archbishop Neinstadt about whether Shelley should be reported, and it should be a matter for the law enforcement to decide?
No.
Why not? He's a mandatory reporter, and you're his advisor.
Well, I can probably best describe my response to that question as working from the present back. Multiple St. Paul police officers, the Ramsey County Attorney's Office, the Washington County Attorney's Office, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and the Justice Department's Task Force on Internet Crimes Against Children have all reviewed the material and all come to the same conclusion: it's not illegal child pornography. The only person that has ever characterized that as illegal child pornography is Jennifer Hasselberger. While she's not a mandated reporter, she was repeatedly advised by me and Father Laird to report it if she thought it was illegal. So it's not illegal material. So it didn't need to be reported, and that's always been the position of me and others within the Archdiocese.
On March 5th, 2013, the police showed up at the Chancery, and they met with you and Joe Keppers, and they asked about a priest and possession of child pornography, correct?
Correct.
And you didn't know what priest they were talking about, right?
They didn't identify which priest they were talking about, and I asked them that. Who were they referring to?
Yeah, and you said, well, I don't know. How many priests did you know had been in possession of child pornography?
None.
Or suspected of having been in possession of child pornography at that time?
Well, certainly Jennifer had raised the question about Father Shelley.
So you knew Shelley had been?
Well, and I assumed that Jennifer had reported this, and that's why they were there.
And then why did you deny that you knew that it was Shelley they were investigating?
I didn't deny that. I said, who are you talking about? And they said they didn't know. They couldn't identify the priest. And I said, well, if you tell me who the priest is, assuming it's who I think you're going to be referring to, we'll get you the material.
Why
Which we did, I might add.
Yeah, how many days later?
Within the next day or two.
No, it wasn't.
Was. We got it to Tom Weiser, and he got it to the police as quickly as the police could get over there and pick it up.
Why did you turn it over to him right then and there when it was in the chancery and say, come on down?
Because they didn't have the name of the priest.
You knew the name of the priest because you knew...
I wasn't going to speculate that that was the same thing that Jennifer Hasselberg had been talking about.
You were trying to protect the priest.
No, not at all.
It's argumentative.
If you knew that they were you suspected the Hesselberger had reported Shelley and they're coming looking for a priest who was in possession of child pornography, you knew in your mind who they're looking at. You chose not to tell them, and you chose not to let them into the file, correct?
What I told them is...
Argumentative and improper.
You can answer.
No, it's improper and argumentative, and you know it. Ask a question.
You were answering, go ahead.
Don't make threats and accusations. It's completely inappropriate and unprofessional, I might add.
You go ahead.
I told them when they identified the priest, we'd turn the material over.
Okay,
Which
why
we
didn't you
did.
do it right that minute?
Because they didn't have the name of the priest.
You just told us, you told them right away, you turn it over.
Right.
Right?
As soon as they identified who was the subject of their investigation, if it was who I thought it might be, then I would turn the material over.
So you were being cagey.
No, I was not being cagey. I think they were being sloppy.
You didn't want to cooperate with them, did
Well, counsel, they came in there and said, we want the file on the priest involving child pornography. Our position was there wasn't a child pornography because that had been the conclusion of our investigation. And I told them that. And I said, once you get me the name of the priest, if it's who I think you're talking about, we'll provide the material to you, which we did.
Why did you have to go to Mr. Weiser first? Why didn't you just do it?
Because we were going to turn the material over to him, so as soon as they identified the priest, Mr. Weiser could turn it over to them.
What would have been the harm in simply saying, look, I know that Shelley is the guy, and come on down and look at this. If you're that confident that it wasn't child pornography, and you're that confident the Archbishop wasn't in possession of it, and you're that confident the Archdiocese had been in compliance with the law, why didn't you just go down there and say, here it is, take a look for yourself?
I didn't do that, counsel.
Why didn't you?
It's argumentative, and it's
I
been
didn't do
asked
it.
multiple times.
I know, but why didn't you?
Because I didn't.
Well, for every action there's a motivation. What was your motivation?
Why? There was no motivation. I had no motivation whatsoever. I was prepared to turn the material over if they identified Father Shelley as the subject of their inquiry.
Well, you went then to Mr. Weiser with it, right?
No, Mr. Kippers arranged to get the material to Mr. Weiser because I wasn't working in the chancery at that point in time.
The Archdiocese refused to turn over the Setter report to law enforcement.
No,
initially.
actually, apparently we did turn it over.
Eventually, but
No.
initially.
Apparently the material, the discs we gave them had the Setter report, including Johnson's report.
There's some question about the discs that got turned over and the discs that were in possession of the Archdiocese originally. Do you know what discs were turned over to the police?
I've never seen the discs.
Okay.
And it's further my understanding that Mr. Turnus kept copies of all the discs. He subsequently has turned them over, and apparently they have confirmed that all the material is the same
How
material.
many discs were there?
I don't know, 3, I understand.
From what do you understand that to be?
Joe Kippers or somebody told me there was 3 discs, or Tom told me that, one or the other.
It was 2 days later, after the March 5th visit by the police where they requested the information, and that 3 discs were turned over.
Yeah, 2 days, okay.
2 days later.
After they'd been sitting in our files for 8 years. We took 2 days to get them to them. But yes, as soon as they identified to Mr. Kippers who the priest was, Tom contacted Officer Gillette or whoever it was.
Are you aware of the search terms that were found in the Setter report?
I think I heard Jennifer mention some search terms. I only have a vague recollection of that.
If one of the search terms was many, let me see, quote, free naked boy pictures, unquote, Would that concern you that that's an interest in minors?
I'm not going to speculate. I don't remember what terms she shared with me.
I'm referring to Exhibit 38 and 47 in terms of search terms. It also lists the following search term, quote, hardcore teen boys, unquote. Isn't that suspicious of an interest in child pornography?
I'm not going to characterize it one way or the other. I don't know anything about those kinds of search terms.
I'll quote another search term.
Is this a search term that the experts are using?
The police report.
And that they didn't find anything?
These are the search
Responsive?
terms on the Shelley computer that were identified
Well,
as
counsel,
search terms.
to help you, I don't remember any of the search terms that Jennifer might have shared with me. And it was like
You said
one or
you
two.
saw the SETA report. I'm asking you,
No, I saw parts of Setter's report,
Okay,
what my
well-
testimony was. I didn't see any search terms. I don't recall any search terms.
this comes from SETA report
I
and
don't
police investigation.
care where it comes from. I'm telling you, I don't recall any of those things. And I'm not prepared to characterize what that means.
When I use the quote from the report that shows the search term, quote, European teen boys, unquote, does that cause concern that that might be a reason to believe there's an interest in minors or child porn?
I don't have any knowledge of what those things mean.
Quote, helpless teen boys, unquote. Is that suspicious or reason to believe that he may be in possession of child pornography?
Same
So,
here.
counsel, is this for you and your news media report after the deposition? Because this witness has testified he has no knowledge of
Yeah.
any of this, and it's your gamesmanship.
This
And
is
it's
this is a witness
inappropriate.
that this is a witness
Counsel,
that
this
chose
is
not to cooperate with the
inappropriate.
police or even tell them.
This has nothing to do with your case
and is making a
and
claim,
this deposition.
and is
I
making a
believe
claim.
that the judge would not be pleased to know this is where we're going. This has gone so far overboard and has nothing to do with the deposition or the Doe 1 case under which we sit today. It is almost embarrassing that you're doing this. It's completely unfounded and it's unprofessional to this witness, and it's only for your own purposes. I'd ask you as an officer of the court to move on and ask questions that this witness is here to answer honestly and truthfully what he knows, and not just do your games.
This is a nuisance and a negligence claim, and this is about the protection of these children. This is very current and recent events, counsel. And if you don't care about these kids, I do, and that's why we're here today. So that's my speech to you.
You're the only one who cares,
I'm gonna
right,
be asking
counsel?
these
You're the only one who
questions.
cares about children, is that what you say?
Well-
And you know that's not accurate either, do you?
Yeah.
And is that, again, just for your own benefit? That's, again, not professional whatsoever.
It's responsive to your dialogue.
No, it is not.
Are you aware that the police determined and that Setter determined that Shelley was the only one that had exclusive use of that computer?
I'm not. That's not true.
Okay.
I've never heard the police say that, and that wasn't Setter's position either.
So that's news to you if it's true?
Well, I think Mr. Johnson expressed a view about that. I don't know that Mr. Setter did.
What was Johnson's view?
In his opinion, that only Father Shelley had access to some of those sites because he had a password.
Okay. I'm going to turn to Keating, and we had made some reference to that earlier. Before I do, there's some reference somewhere to the Archbishop's Council, and that was not a term that I had seen before. What is the Archbishop's Council?
Well, it's the Archbishop and some of his advisors, the chancellors, the vicar general. The council has also included, at times, the regional vicars, the finance officer, auxiliary bishops. I think that's it.
Is that something that was constituted by Archbishop Neinstadt under his?
There was also an Archbishop's Council under Archbishop Flynn as well.
I just hadn't seen that term before. Do you know what the council is used for? Are they like consultors or any specific purpose? Do you know?
Well, we start out with a song and prayer, and then the Archbishop normally reports on certain matters, and then anybody else, if they've put something on the agenda, can raise an issue that would be helpful for the council to hear or know about, or some of it's FYI stuff.
Is there anything in the Archbishop Council meetings that have been discussed by those in attendance pertinent to the whole question of sexual abuse of minors by the clerics in or out of ministry? And
I don't think so. I don't recall a meeting ever discussing that subject.
Is that something that it gets recorded by minutes or notes, or is it?
The council meeting?
Yes.
There's, at times there was an agenda that if you wanted something to be brought up at council, they wanted you to put it on an agenda, but there was no minutes of the meetings as far as I know.
Okay, I'm going to go to Keating, and when we talk about the girl, I refer to her as Doe 20.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you know if anybody from the Archdiocese ever asked Father Keating his account of the events pertaining to Doe 20 or any of the other possible encounters?
The clergy review board did. I don't know about anybody else.
The Clergy Review Board is constituted by the Archbishop to help make a determination, help the Archbishop make a determination about whether Keating should be continued in ministry, correct?
Well, the clergy review board exists for two purposes. One is to help the Archbishop ascertain someone's fitness for ministry, but they can also be utilized to help the Archbishop determine the credibility of allegations. So I think when the matter was referred to the clergy review board excuse me, involving Father Keating, I think it was more the latter than the former, to help the Archbishop Flynn come to some conclusion about the credibility of the allegations that Doe 20 was making.
Would the Clergy Review Board record the testimony that was taken?
No.
Beyond the findings that they made that it's substantiated or not substantiated, is there any record of their deliberations or their findings beyond that?
The only record that I would be aware of is once they had discussed the matter, then it was normally the chair would draft a proposed recommendation and circulate it among them for their comment and further refining of that recommendation before it went to the Archbishop, once they all agreed with it, or the majority of them agreed with it. So if the chair did that in that instance and saved earlier drafts of that, they might exist, but that's the only record that I'm aware of.
Was the Clergy Review Board divided in their decision concerning Keating and the report made by Doe 20?
I can't say that I was there for all of their deliberations, but I didn't sense there was much division.
Did you find it troubling, in your own view, that they found that it was not a substantiated claim, having seen the video and having done some investigation?
Frankly, no.
You didn't believe her?
No.
Why?
I thought she was very mixed up and confused. It's not a view I shared with the Clergy Review Board, but that was my own personal view of it.
Did anybody in the Clergy Review Board express why they found the claims to have been not substantiated and thus sending the message that she wasn't believed?
I think the sense was, first of all, I think they were of the belief that she believed something had happened, but I think that the fact that she hadn't characterized her relationship with Keating as abusive until after she took a coursework in college that somehow touched on that topic, that she began to reevaluate her relationship with Father Keating. The fact that she seemed, with each telling of her story, to have embellished is not a good word, but that she had, continued to increase her description of the extent to which there had been any kind of physical or sexual contact, and the fact that she seemed to be, again, very troubled and confused in some fashion, And I think there was also the question about the nature of the family dynamics within that family.
Well, what did that have to do with whether or not Keating sexually abused her?
Well, I think that she was describing, for example, Father Keating reading to all of the kids with the mom being there, and that as part of that he'd be touching her or having her lie on top of him, and there was a real question about how that could have occurred in the presence of all of these others. At some point in time, there was a photograph of her lying with Father Keating, and the question of, who took this photograph and where could this have, they viewed that as really odd.
Is that a word, a characterization that some of them used, or just your interpretation of what they saw?
Well, I think they were troubled by what they saw as the dynamic in that family. But I think they were also troubled that Father Keating was a bit clueless in recognizing that as well.
Now, Keating did get placed on some restrictions. To your knowledge, were those adhered to?
As far as I know, although I seem to recall at some time there was some question about whether he was adhering to some restrictions, and there were some questions that were raised primarily by the Archbishop. Now I'm talking about Archbishop Neinstedt. The original recommendation was made by the Clergy Review Board to Archbishop Flynn, I believe. And then when Archbishop Neinstedt came on board, he actually became friends with one of the Doe 20's brothers. I think he began learning from the family some of their concerns about what had been done by the Clergy Review Board, what restrictions had been imposed, and whether Father Keating was abiding by those restrictions. So the Archbishop would ask me, and I'd say, well, Father McDonough's the go-to person with St. Thomas, which was where Father Keating was, and so we'll have to ask Father McDonough where they're at and all of that.
At some point in time, I think the family was led to believe that he was on some kind of supervision or monitoring or restriction. Do you know if they, if he ever was on monitoring?
I thought that the recommendations made by the Clergy Review Board, and I don't remember those specifically, and I haven't reviewed those in years, but I thought they were being followed, and I thought a monitoring plan had been set up. The only question I remember being really raised, other than the one I just described, was at some point in time, Father Keating was to go to Rome and do some teaching or something in Rome, and a question arose about how he would be monitored in Rome, and there was somebody that was identified that would do that monitoring while he was in Rome. So that too led me to believe that the monitoring that was supposed to take place was taking place.
In May of 2010, Father Pichet says that Keating never went on monitoring. Do you have any knowledge of
Again, that would be inconsistent with what I understood from Father McDonough. And I think there was an email exchange at some point in time with Don Briel around this question about Keating being in Rome. Because I think it was in part the Archbishop who raised that question. If he's going to Rome, how is he going to be monitored when he's in Rome? So I in turn brought that question to Father McDonough, who then conferred with Don Briel, and somehow they took that information back to the Archbishop.
When was that?
I don't know. I couldn't pin it down. Again, there should be, well, I don't know that there would have been a memorandum about that, but I do recall an email exchange that I was copied on, and Don Briel's name was on that, because I would not have communicated directly with Mr. Briel.
Going back to priests who are accused as offenders or credibly found to have been offenders, receiving payments, are you aware that Father Stevens have received payments after having been, I guess he was convicted of child sexual abuse?
Well, he was working as an IT guy in the Archdiocese, so I assumed he was getting compensated somehow for that work. But how he was being compensated, I have no information.
Do you have any knowledge of anybody, any parishioners or the public ever having been alerted to the fact that Stevens had a history known to the Archdiocese of having abused and been convicted of child abuse?
Well, I mean, his conviction was a matter of public record, and so I'm not sure what you're asking.
Well, a public record, it doesn't necessarily mean that people know.
Right.
And the Archdiocese knew. The question is, did the Archdiocese tell anybody? To your knowledge?
I don't know.
Father Kern has a record of receiving monthly payments. What was your involvement of Father Kern, and did you know that he was receiving such payments?
I didn't know that, no.
Kraut Kramer, what do you know about him having received payments from the Archdiocese?
I think I learned at some point in time that there had been a mortgage payment or something that had been made, or a lump sum paid on a mortgage for him or something of that nature, but that's all I know.
And before NPR reported it, did you know that Capone had been receiving such payments?
No.
When you saw the NPR report, did you see the NPR report on that?
Well, I was a bit surprised by that, and I know that some have raised the question about whether he really got those payments or whether Scott Domeyer misdirected that money, because Father Capone should have been on whatever pension he earned. So I don't know, but I don't know anything about those payments other than what I saw in the news.
Okay. I mean, you were involved in the Capone case, so you know what his history was.
Yeah, I'll not forget the Capone case.
Huh?
I won't forget the Capone case. Nor will you, probably.
Right about that. What about Turner?
I know nothing of any payments to Turner.
Okay. And Brown? You know anything about that?
I don't know anything about Brown.
Okay. The Archdiocese reported that they recently removed Father Gallatin from a ministry for, quote, I think it was boundary violations, unquote. What do you know about what Gallatin did or is accused to have done?
The only thing I ever learned about Father Gallatin was that at some point in time he had placed his hand on like the stomach of some youth at some kind of outing. That's all I ever heard.
And do you know what the source of that information is that the Archdiocese relied upon in making those statements to the public for his reasons for his removal?
I don't know what statements the Archdiocese has made. That's the only information I've ever learned about Father Gallatin.
So where did you get that information?
Oh, I couldn't even tell you where that I would have ever heard that from. Could have been from Jennifer Hasselberger, but I don't know where else.
Do you remember having discussions with Hasselberger about Gallatin?
I don't.
Do you remember having disagreements or discussions with Hasselberger about certain priests who should not be in ministry, or that she had more grave concerns about than perhaps others?
Well, certainly Father Shelley was among those that she didn't think should be in ministry. Not sure that I remember anybody else, and I remember her mentioning something about Gallatin, but I don't remember in what context that was in.
What about Wayman? What do you know about the reason given for his removal and or the history behind him?
The only things, I think I learned that because it had been referred to the clergy board, if I recall correctly. There had been a report to the police, maybe up in Coon Rapids or something, and there was something else, but at this point in time, I don't remember what that was.
How many child sexual abuse allegations, when was it to go before the board? Do you remember?
I don't remember. It would have been within the first few years, I think, that I was at the Archdiocese, and the things that had brought him there hadn't occurred, I think, while I was in the chancery, so I wasn't there to know, the history kind of stuff. But when, I don't know what, they were doing something with him and they wanted it to go to the clergy board, if I recall correctly. I'm pretty certain that he went to the clergy board.
What else, if anything, did you learn about Wayman?
I remember a description of something, he was at somebody's house and there was a question about a young girl and butterfly kisses. And that's about all I remember. It was something to do with butterfly kisses.
How did that come to you?
I think from a review of his file in connection with the referral to the clergy review board.
How many matters, to your knowledge, were given to the clergy review board for their consideration and recommendation that pertain to accusations of childhood sexual abuse?
Where they were asked to determine the credibility of the allegations?
Well, I think isn't their role basically to give advice to the Archbishop?
Relative to their view of the priest's fitness for ministry, yes.
So how many matters do you believe, or were you involved in, where it was submitted to the clergy review board?
Related to that question of fitness for ministry.
And safety pertaining to sexual abuse of minors.
Well,
I'm not talking about alcoholism or other issues. I'm talking about abuse.
okay, let me see if I can characterize those. In terms of the question of credibility of allegations, the only one I'm aware of is Keating.
Okay.
All the rest of them, it was more related to the question of fitness for ministry, but most of those was where either there hadn't been sexual contact, or if there had been sexual contact, it was with an adult that may or may not have involved some degree of pastoral relationship.
Were there any submitted to the review board pertaining to minors other than Keating on the question of fitness?
Well, the Wayman, in terms of the concerns that were raised about Wayman, even though there was no allegation that he had sexual contact with him, those instances or examples did involve minors.
Wayman was found to be fit for ministry and continued in ministry?
They made a recommendation, and I think he continued in ministry. I don't remember what that recommendation was.
Did the Gallatin thing go before the review board?
Not while I was there.
Any other matters that you can recall that went before the review board at any time pertaining to sexual abuse in minors? Under Flynn or Neinstedt?
I don't think so. Not that I'm recalling at the moment. I think that all the rest of them were adult cases.
When you refer to Wayman and the butterfly kiss that you had some memory of, what was that, and how did that, what was the description of that?
If I recall correctly, he was like the guest in the house of these parents, and there was some kids there. There might have been other people, certainly the parents were there as well. And that somehow he was in a room with the kids, and he had asked a girl if she knew what a butterfly kiss was, and she said no, and that he apparently had demonstrated a butterfly kiss, which is where you flick your eyelash on someone's cheek, I guess, is what I recall.
I'm getting pretty close to done here, but let's take a break right now, a short one, and then we'll finish up.
Okay.
Off the video record, 2 p.m.